You're listening to The Donor Doctor Show, where your host, James Newberry, will help you improve the health of your fundraising. Now over to James.
Hello, this is The Donor Doctor, James Newberry here with one of my favorite young colleagues. Will you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Michael Garner. I work here with The Donor Doctor.
Anyway, let's talk about it. You have a lot of experience, not just in direct mail, but in telemarketing, and you're also getting a graduate degree right now. Is that correct?
Correct. I am in the Masters of Public Administration program at George Mason, and I am specializing in nonprofit management. And so they have quite a few courses on the nonprofit world, fundraising, all kinds of good stuff like that. So,
well, we know a lot of people. I ran into at the Direct Marketing Association a couple people from Kentucky that are head of the Christian Appalachian Project, and they came from a background of college fundraising, and a lot of people do. Dr. Richard Dresner, who we know, he was a history PhD, but he didn't get a job in. There's only so many teaching jobs, so people go into fundraising. But people don't generally think of fundraising or nonprofit management, if you will, when they're going to college. I imagine you were the same. Right?
Sure. Yeah, no one really says, I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up. But it's more something that you fall into. You realize either out of necessity or you just happen to realize that you have a knack for it. And that was kind of the case for me. I was going to college in my undergrad, and I needed a job to help me pay for college. And they were just opening up the telefund center there to raise money for scholarships. So I applied, got a job, and all 4 years of my undergrad I was there. I ended up becoming the assistant manager of the telefund center, helped write the scripts and all of that for the callers. And there were two types of people who worked there: people who quickly realized that they hated it and that they didn't want to do this anymore, and people who actually loved it and were really good at it. And I loved it. So that's
with college, you have a lot of people, I imagine, interested about what's happening at the college right now. So there's, at least I know that people from my college have called me, and they usually pick a woman, actually. I don't know if they do. Is that what you did? You opposite sex? Or?
They did not do, we didn't do any of that, but it's an interesting idea. Yeah.
Well, it's a nice voice. I don't know if that was on purpose, but I imagine that's a great experience. Now, when you talk about telemarketing, what did you learn about that you apply to direct marketing? I imagine you try to get a higher gift by asking for more than you think they could give. Is that one thing you did?
Sure. We would always, ask for more than what they gave the previous time or what their highest contribution was. I think one of the most important things with telemarketing is you have to really listen to your donor, and I think this is true in all kinds of fundraising. You have to find out what their goals are, what their what they want to accomplish, and find a way to connect that back to giving to the school or whatever your organization is. And, it's really easy to do that with telemarketing or with, major donor fundraising where you're meeting face-to-face. Direct mail, it's a little bit more difficult to listen to your donor and find out what it is that they want. But there are ways that you can, do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but most people don't do that, but you don't have the feedback like you do with the phone.
Yeah. But it's all, fundraising really is all about finding out what it is that your donor wants, what their goals are, and finding a way to connect what they want with what you want. And once you make that connection, you get the gift.
One thing that I think a lot of people, I'll give you some of my background in fundraising. Like you, it wasn't my job. My interest in college, I'll be a fundraiser. My interest in college, I was interested in, I majored in finance, actually. I had a minor in Middle Eastern studies, so I don't know what I'm doing here. But I was active in politics. In fact, I led an effort to abolish the student government, which didn't work, but it got me a lot of publicity, So it was an experience.
I'm not surprised by that, by the way, Jim. I'm not surprised you would do that.
So I did get on the college magazine they had, but that was actually a good experience. You do press releases, you talk to, things of that sort. But the first time I had a job really with fundraising was I worked for a state rep, and I had to write his fundraising letter. And he was a dentist, so I went and wrote for that. So that was my first, and then you'd invite people to events. Fish fries. I did a fish fry, and I'll never forget. This gives you an idea how lowly politicians are thought of. That he wouldn't take the campaign check because he'd been burned before, but he would take my check of a 22-year-old. So that was funny. But anyway, I remember a lot of people have a problem raising funds out of shyness. You know what I mean? You have to get over.
I think that's probably one of the biggest obstacles, and that's one of the reasons why people who leave the profession quickly after they join it, that's probably one of the number one reasons why, is because they realize, I can't do this. I can't continue to ask people for money. It's too awkward for me. And I think that's really just, it's all about your mindset. If you have to think of it from the perspective of the donor. And all good fundraisers are able to do that. They're able to look at things the way the donor would look at them. And the donor is thinking, how can I make an impact? I have this money that, I want to give. How can I make an impact with this money? You're not taking money from them. I mean, so long as you're fundraising ethically and you're not, raising money for a scam group, which, hopefully no one would do, but it happens.
Sure.
But if if you believe in your cause, and if your donor believes in your cause, then you're not hitting up the donor for money. It's not like asking your parents for money. It's not like asking, the bank for a loan.
Right.
It's you're giving them an opportunity to be involved in things that they are passionate about. And so it's a reciprocal relationship. It's not a one-sided relationship. And I think that's why some people are afraid to ask for money, because they view it as one-sided, and they need to view it as a reciprocal relationship. The donor's getting something out of it just as much as the organization that's getting the donation.
Right. There's something in your background that I think might be helpful. I'm talking about this shyness. My son just graduated from college, and I was telling him how to get a job, and he just wants to send resumes. They don't want to get on the phone, or I say even better, just drop by the office. You know what I mean? It's very hard to get them to do what's really the most effective, which is networking. And of course, that's the same with fundraising. Although we're in the direct mail business, it's actually better to schedule a call. I mean, if you want to get a higher percentage, if the phone call or a personal visit would give you a higher percentage of donations. Now, you have something in your background I've never really asked much about, but I would think that would help you overcome shyness. Now, you're a Mormon, and you did a 2-year
mission trip.
Sorry,
Yep.
I saw the Book of Mormon. I can't even remember something. Anyway, in Malaysia or Sri Lanka?
I was Singapore, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka. Yeah.
And that would be an excellent experience as far as dealing with rejection and kind of overcoming and kind of enjoying it. Maybe enjoying the whole experience.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people have this kind of, it's an ordeal. If you think if it's an ordeal, you're not going to last long.
Yeah.
I had the worst job I ever had was, I was in college. It was in a recession. And I was selling encyclopedias, but they had convinced me I really wasn't. I was placing educational libraries. But it was such an ordeal. If you don't have a good product, something you believe in, then it's quite...
It's difficult. A chore.
Yes, it's a chore. Now, was there anything they did to train you to kind of overcome that? I mean, you kind of you have goals maybe, so you're kind of happy if you're just exceeding your goals, perhaps.
I guess there wasn't anything in particular, but there was, when I was a missionary, they did really stress the concept of talking to everyone, even people who might not, you'd look at them and, they're covered in tattoos and smoking and, all this, like you'd think, okay, that person would not make a good Mormon, but, you don't know their heart. You don't know what's on the inside. So talk to them. So there was kind of this culture of talk to everyone. I think especially, you look at, like people your son's age, when they grow up on the internet, they grow up with, texting and cell phones and social media. We've created so many ways, and not just younger people who grew up on that technology, but also older people. We've created a lot of ways to avoid talking to each other.
Yes.
And it makes it more awkward sometimes to talk to people.
I think you're right. I think people skills as far as that is down.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. When I got a cell phone, I said I will never do a text. I don't know why I say these things. Now I prefer text to calling.
Sure. Yeah.
It's easier to connect to people and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, it used to be that phone calls were, were less personal than in-person visits, and so people would say, I'll prefer to call them instead of visit them, and now I prefer to text them instead of calling them, and we're just getting further and further away from each other. And
let's get back to your college. I've seen your materials. It's quite interesting. Some of the concepts they've given to why people give. Like you were telling me of two. Like some people give like defensively, because they're maybe like their kid goes to a private school and they don't want to be left out of the book. That was something.
Sure. There's image motivation. So people want to be seen by others as being charitable. There's self-concept maintenance, which is people want to be able to view themselves as being charitable.
Right.
I guess the difference between the two is one, you're giving to convince other people that you're a good person.
Right.
The other one, you're giving to convince yourself that you're a good person. There's also, I can't remember his name right now, but this one scholar coined the term warm glow giving.
I can see that.
Giving creates a warm glow. It makes people feel good.
Right. I've seen endorphins or whatever
they've done brain scans,
right.
Being charitable triggers the pleasure sensors in the brain. So some people give because it really just makes them feel good. So
it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a number of reasons why people give.
Mm-hmm.
When you do a lot of different kinds of fundraising, I know you're very good at the museum fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
You've also done some political advocacy fundraising. When you're doing those kind of two different mailings, like how do you approach them differently?
Well, I guess it depends. First of all, you have to think, what is the donor's motivation? With political type
it's more anger
donors,
based.
It's more of a visceral reaction. Donating for them.
They don't really want anything in return either. They want a solution to their
they
problem.
don't care about being recognized. They don't care about getting a premium gift item in return for their donation.
Yeah, I agree.
They just want to stick it to the other guy.
Right.
But that would be for the small dollar donors. I think for the large dollar donors, if you want to get the 4, 5, 6 figure gifts, you're going to have to give them more than just anger. Those people typically want something in return. That they at least want to know that their money is going to be used wisely.
Exactly. Whereas the person giving $20,
they don't care
necessarily. It's just kind of like a knee-jerk reaction,
mm-hmm.
and they're not always discerning in the group they give to. I mean,
right. And
I found.
In fact, there was a study of a Feed the Hungry charity.
Right.
Also a very emotional appeal.
Sure.
And they found that so it was a direct mail test, and one version included language in there about a study that showed how effective this charity was, and that this charity was one of the most effective charities.
I think it was the American Cancer Society. Jeff Peters was talking about it. Maybe American Lung Association, something like that.
That might be a different thing then. I'm not sure.
But they found that it was a slight detractor, that the fact that they are a 4-star charity navigator, which is amazing.
Yes, this study, it was an independent, group that said that this is one of the most effective feed the hungry charities out there.
Yeah, no.
And they found that the version that had the proof of the organization's effectiveness did worse, and they figured that it was because it introduced the concept of, maybe not all of my money is actually going to be used for, it triggered the logical part of the brain instead of the emotional part of the brain.
We want to work with the emotion.
We want to turn off the logic part. If you're looking to get small dollar donors, you want to just focus on emotion and don't take away from the emotion. So, don't worry about, convincing the donor that their money is going to good use, because they don't care about that. They care about the emotion.
I think it can be a component of the package. I just don't think it'd be your lead. That can't be driving the bus.
Sure.
It can be part of the bus, because the guy I was talking to said it was a minor. I don't know if that was an aberration. Yeah. And that group, whatever the name of it was a very prominent group. In other words, it had a lot of credibility. It was like best in class. There's always, in any kind of niche, there's certain groups that are better known than others. Like in animals, like Humane Society, ASPCA are better known.
Yeah. So
talking about them being reliable is maybe less important, than some group, some dog shelter nobody's ever heard of. It's not in their area, for instance. That would be more important to kind of establish credibility. Now, we were talking about museums too. There, you're kind of going for a different motivation. You go a little bit for a higher dollar guy, even if it's a small dollar. You're still you're going to get a higher average gift, obviously. The motivation might be different, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I think the motivation would. There's this book. I forget who wrote it, but it's called The Denial of Death. And, it's just basically this psychologist who argues that, we are always in search of a way to, we're always in search of immortality, no matter who we are. We want to...
even if we know we're going to die, we want what was important in our life to live on.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So, most people do that through, raising a family, but they also do it through the organizations that they donate to. And so, I think that plays a big role in museum fundraising, is people want to leave a legacy. They want to, support these institutions that, represent values or, something that's important to them.
I agree. It's nostalgia. That's why, I was reading a book about Cracker Barrel, kind of like people like that. It's kind of like they kind of reminisce.
Yeah.
Same thing, I think. Yeah, it is very different. Now, I have an interesting story. I was talking to a guy, and he had a job as a college fundraiser, and he came from a middle class background, and he had this guy who'd given $50,000 before, but for whatever reason he couldn't ask for that much, so he asked him for $25,000, and the guy was offended and didn't give him anything because he thought it was a slight that he couldn't give. Because all his buddies gave $50,000, but he wasn't good enough or something. So you never know.
No one's ever offended because you ask for too much. Nobody will ever be offended because you ask for too much.
Well, you must think I'm somebody of higher class than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right. I have heard in direct mail, I don't think you'd want to ask for 50 or 100,000 because I don't think those kind of people give that donation.
Sure.
I once got a donation for $500,000, but it wasn't really through direct mail. It was they found out about the group through direct mail, and then they called the group and gave them $500,000 that way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I don't think people are not just going to give a $500,000 or $100,000. They got to know more.
Yeah.
They can do some due diligence before they make that kind of sacrifice.
Sure. Yeah, the most I've ever gotten is through direct mail is 10,000. And I've only gotten a couple of those.
Yes.
$1,000 gifts are quite common.
Right.
But yeah, you won't get many 5-figure or 6-figure gifts through direct mail.
You said something interesting to me was that there's around 100,000 development directors in America. I don't know if you know that are paid. I think it depends on these statistics. And there's a high turnover. And I guess it's because people aren't trained in it. Is it not competitive? Is it the difficulty of raising funds? Is it they're not helped?
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons why development directors leave is because the organizations, there isn't a culture of philanthropy within the organization. They think, fundraising is the development director's job.
Because they don't want to do it.
Right.
They want to offload it and not be responsible for it.
Right, because it's uncomfortable. No one likes asking for money.
Yeah.
So they say, okay, we hired a development director. That's their job.
And they're easy to scapegoat when they're not raising the funds.
Correct. Not only that, but it's, fundraising, especially when you're looking at cultivating donors and getting those large gifts, it takes time.
Lack of patience, too, because you have to develop those relationships.
I mean, you can cultivate a donor for a year and a half before you ask them for that big gift. And
so if you cut too quickly, you may not even know how effective somebody is.
Exactly. So it really takes, a couple of years before you find out whether a development director is really making a big difference. And a lot of organizations are not that patient. Understandably so. I understand why they're, you don't want to wait 2 years before you realize that you made a mistake by hiring the wrong person. But organizations really do need to create this culture of philanthropy and realize that fundraising is every board member should be a fundraiser. Every, the executive director should be a fundraiser. Every full-time employee should be a fundraiser. Your volunteers should be fundraisers. It's not just the development director. The development director coordinates these efforts, but they shouldn't be responsible for raising every single dollar. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of turnover. But yeah, it's a problem in the nonprofit world, and it's one of the hardest jobs to fill. Organizations will post for a development director, and they won't find a qualified candidate for a year or more. So it's really a tough job to fill. Partially because they're not willing to pay what a development director's worth, and also because there aren't enough development directors out there.
Oh, yes. One last question. Did you watch that TED talk from the fundraiser who did AIDS and other research?
Dan Pallotta,
yes.
the myth of the overhead myth.
Yes, it seems like that's another problem you have to contend with, is that people are just not realistic in how they judge a charity's value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For instance, you can be knocked down for having a lot of money saved, in an annuity or whatever, rainy day fund,
right.
All sorts of things. There's no understanding like of startup costs, and he was obviously very effective, but then they just tore him down. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think thankfully we're starting to move away from looking at overhead as an indicator of a charity's effectiveness. I think most people who are familiar with the industry will readily recognize that the percentage spent on overhead is irrelevant. So hopefully we're starting to see that move towards looking at an organization's impact and judging their effectiveness based on their impact and not based on the percentage that they spent on administration or fundraising or what have you.
Which will go down in time.
It will go down in time, and if you're the ASPCA and you can have a commercial of Sarah McLachlan singing a sad song and raise millions of dollars from that one commercial.
That song is very powerful.
Yeah. So I mean, like if you have celebrity support, if you have major donors, then great. Let's judge based on overhead because your overhead will be low because you'll be getting in these massive amounts of gifts. If you're a mom and pop nonprofit, focusing on overhead is very dangerous, and we'll end up with a system where the only charities that exist are these huge billion-dollar corporations.
Well, I think that is the goal. That was like the United Way. They've obviously had their own problems. But yeah, certain ones like I was listening to a talk by Claude Grizzard he does fundraising like for the Salvation Army, and they of course have all sorts of fundraising with low, like their thrift shops, for instance, or the thing out they have every Christmas, with the kettles and stuff. Those have low percentages. So something that's more expensive, like say direct mail, it's reduced. I mean, I think you'd agree that the groups that over rely on direct mail are going to have problems too.
Sure.
If you have no direct mail, then you have no source of, or much less source of new donors that you can upgrade, or get. But if you just rely just on direct mail, you're going to have problems too. You'd agree with that?
Yeah. You really have to have a comprehensive development plan, but
kind of like a military. You need to have just an army, you have a navy, you have the whole thing.
Sure. And I think at the end of the day, the nonprofit sector is absolutely crucial for any society, in particular ours. The civil society is based on the nonprofit sector, and if we focus on overhead costs as being a measure of how effective a nonprofit is, and if people say, oh, well, I don't want to donate to overhead, then what we'll end up with is these huge corporations like the Red Cross, which does good work, but it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. We'll have these huge corporations, and we won't have these grassroots level organizations that really do a lot of great work, and that we rely on as a society. Those will go away because people don't want to donate to overhead. So, I think it's important that we move away from that.
Well, very good. Mike Garner, appreciate it here. The
My
first
pleasure.
Outside guest on the Donor Doctor show.
I'm honored.
Wait before you say that. Now, I know you're from New Jersey. I forgot to point that out.
New Jersey, the great state of New Jersey. Yeah.
But you're not a Chris Christie or Donald Trump fan, from what I understand.
No. Christie's good for Jersey, but
he's very Jersey. Comes across as very Jersey.
We'll keep him in Jersey. Donald Trump, he's
You're not a fan of his.
He's a bit of a.
I actually have met him before.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've met him too.
I saw him at the boxing match with George Foreman and when he had Marla Maples.
Okay.
I was not too far from him. But anyway, I appreciate you coming on and telling me your experiences.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.